In this video, we're going to look at iterators. Now, what an iterator is, it's a method. I should be careful of using that word method, and I don't mean in a formal sense. I mean more of a way to access each element of some kind of collection. And the two collections we're going to look at are an array and then a string. And there's other types of collections, sets, trees. I mean, Ruby has a very rich set of collections that you can utilize in your programming. But for our simple example, we're just going to stick to these two. Now I have, in this sample program 0905, I've declared two arrays. The first one just an array of numbers, and we haven't really covered arrays in depth, and we will in other videos. And again, this is just exposure to you, so don't get too caught up in it. But to define an array, you use these brackets and commas to separate the elements. And these do not have to be the same type in here. In fact, if I put in dog here, it's going to be just as happy with that as if it was a number. So you don't have to be the same type of element inside there. So the thing to think about is if that array is going to be used for some math, the 1, the 3, and 4, and the 5 are going to be fine, but your program hits that dog and it's going, well, I don't know how to add dogs. So got to be careful doing that, but it does have flexibility that way. That kind of gets into that duck typing stuff we talked about in other videos. B is just set up as another array with just some strings inside of it, and then finally C is just set up as a straight string, saying our little familiar hello world. So the method that we're looking at here is each, dot each. And again, look at the object. We're calling that on the object. So that class of that object has that each thing. If we do an RI on, since it's an array, let's take a look at that. So an array each, and it tells you how to set up here. It calls the block, whatever's going to be following that. Here in our case, in these, it's do and then that var. And it calls it once for each element in whatever this guy is right here, this array. That's what they're referring to as self, passing that element as a parameter. So that's what gets put into here, is the actual element that it hits. So every time it loops through here, it puts it into that item. Now their example is almost identical to what we're doing. Their syntax is a touch different, and either one of these syntaxes is fine. This is a block syntax where everything is enclosed within the curly brackets, where what we've done is extended out a little bit in using that do statement and then with an end. And it kind of replaces the curly brackets. Pretty much the same thing in the way to think about it. So that's what that does. So you see that B is identical, except we put B in there. Now C, being a string, we've had to do something a little bit different. With strings, if you do an each for a string, that's each line inside of that string. And that's not so applicable to something you're declaring as a variable like this. It's very applicable if you're reading in a file. And in a couple of videos, we're going to cover basic input-output and start looking at reading in some files. And there you're going to see a structure where we're doing a string and then each, because we've read a file into a string, and then we're going to iterate over each line. So each, in reference to a string like that, means the line. In order to get the individual characters, we have to say each byte. And then the value that gets put in here is actually a byte value of whatever that character is. So we have to use a little bit different. We have to use put C, which is put a character out. So this is the way we can iterate through a string and get the individual characters and take a look at them. And to show you what it's doing, I actually put a little separator guy in there so you can see it's outputting each character individually as it marches through here. And I'll show you why I did that when we get down to this one. Now we have a similar structure to this each, but it's more of that for next kind of thing from other languages. And we say for the variable in whatever that collection structure is. And we get a similar kind of setup going there where we iterate through each value in there. I like this personally. It's syntactic sugar. In other words, it does the same thing, but this is clear what you're doing here. Here it's touch mysterious if you're looking at code trying to figure out what it does, but it's your level of what you're comfortable with here. Now the bottom one I wanted to look at is where this breaks down. It doesn't work for strings. You got to use the each byte. If you do this, it's just going to put out the lines, which works great if you're dealing with a file and you want to get the individual lines. So let's go ahead and run this and look at the output. So the first one just iterates through here, through the A. There we go, 1 through 5. The second one iterates through B. Cat, dog, bat, dingo, and it's a puts S, so it puts it out after each end. Now this puts C doesn't put a carriage return on every end. So you can see it just puts out the individual characters. So we get all of them, including the space, getting output here. And now doing the same loop, but with that for in structure, we get that. And finally down here, the one where it doesn't work is where we did the for, the variable in the C, the string, and it just puts out the one line and then the character. So you can see that this doesn't work if you want the individual characters. So that's a little bit about iterators in Ruby.